David, thank you so much for joining me on stage. I thought it was a fantastic discussion and really appreciated your contributions. I'm curious though, and I've never known this, how did TERBINE actually come together with IBM to develop the charging network management platform?
It's a very interesting story. We went out and talked to a number of companies that are building new electric vehicle charging networks. And we noticed that a lot of the problems with the early charging networks is that they didn't think of key things like security, especially cybersecurity. They didn't think about asset management and maintenance. And they also didn't think about general service and those kinds of issues and how they all connect to the cloud in a very reliable way. So we realized that the perfect partner for that was IBM. We came together, and now we have integrated IBM's Maximo asset management system with the TERBINE software to create a comprehensive environment. It's the first of its kind to use artificial intelligence as well as these powerful tools to actually bring a total solution to a charging network provider. Everything up until now has been kind of a very basic thing. This is now a top-down, well-architected, and well-maintained system.
So glad that you mentioned AI actually, because there's so many different flavors of that, from machine learning all the way to geospatial models. How would you consider these use cases that would be helpful for utilities to think about, and are they more on the machine learning side? Are they more on the foundational model side? Where does that stand?
Yeah, the charging network management platform has to take into account the various models because it kind of depends on what you're trying to deal with. So as compared to traditional algorithms, which are sort of fixed, the advantage of machine learning is that the system can take data that's coming at it, and as the data volume grows, it can start sifting through it and making decisions that are operational.
Yeah.
Keyword being operational. So here's a truck. It's an electric truck. It's coming down a road. It happens to be going up a hill, which is dragging down the battery more than if they were going down the hill. It's very severe weather and a whole bunch of other issues. And then the charging network management platform can look out ahead of the vehicle and say, all right, there's 10 charging stations to choose from. We're going to pick this one because it maps very well with what's happening right now. So if you just had a generalized algorithm and not AI, it would just kind of say, an algorithm would say, all right, here's an available charger. But it's not taking into account a ton of variables that would make that the most efficient and reliable and fast experience for the driver and therefore whatever company is running that fleet.
Thank you for that. And I'm curious now really just to think about this in terms of the utility industry. What are the benefits or some of the use cases that you see for utilities in particular?
Yeah, and this is another place where the other side of AI comes into play, where doing things like gathering a lot of data and creating what they call recommendations. So a recommendation could be, like the way Siri or Amazon Alexa does something when you ask it a question. On the other hand, when you get to industrial applications, it could be a machine asking the question, which again makes it much more complex and variable. So when I'm talking about charging a 400 kilowatt or even 1 megawatt or 2 megawatt load to say charge a big rig truck, then the utility has this giant load coming at it. The AI can actually predictively know, based on what's happening with that vehicle, that in 20 minutes, a 4 megawatt load is going to hit at this location, and allows the dynamic energy resource management software and other things that these utilities operate with to adjust for that. It might even take power away from somewhere else so they can allocate it there. Now, if you do that predictively, even if it's only done in fractions of a second, hopefully you have more time than that, but it could be fractions of a second, it means that the utility has the opportunity to smooth out loads across a region without it suddenly hitting and causing a problem.
Now, I know you're working very closely with IBM AI in order to manage the data, in order to govern the policies and execute the models. How do you see this evolving over time, and what do you think is next in this space?
Well, I think in the EV charging space, we're about to see a lot more EVs. We're going to see low-end EVs coming up from all over the world. These are going to be much cheaper than internal combustion cars, probably within 5 years, because batteries are the only expensive part and they're getting much cheaper. So you're going to go to this explosion of inexpensive electrically driven vehicles. And on the high end, you're going to have more and more big trucks. The total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle, there's a lot of data now to prove that the TCO is just much better. There's almost no friction generating parts in an electric vehicle, and they're quiet, and you can charge them in many places instead of just a fuel stop with diesel. So there's a lot of advantages. So a lot of big companies are going that way. And if I were looking at it from the perspective of a utility, I would say, man, I really need to understand not only where this is today, but how do I factor and predict loads, not just 5 minutes from now, but a year from now, 2 years, 5 years. Sometimes it takes years to plan capacity when you have to put in new substations and transmission lines. So the future, AI is going to allow better prediction on that, better modeling, and probably most importantly, better to help, guiding the CapEx and OpEx decisions by the utilities.
Excellent. Well, is there anything that you wanted to ask me, David?
I do want to ask you, what do you see as the future of Watson X?
That's a fantastic question. So from our perspective, what we're excited about is this ability to work across platforms. So Watson X is agnostic. We can govern basically any model. We can deploy on any platform. And it's really in this idea where you're synchronizing and federating the EV charging network. It's a little bit what we're trying to do as well from an open perspective. Mm-hmm. So what I would love to see is just worldwide adoption and usage of the tool, but more so from the perspective of making sure that we have security in governing the policies, that we have the ability to access any of the open source models that are developed and not just the ones that we create or that others in the ecosystem create. Use the best of the best and continue to evolve without starting from scratch again.
I think, Watson X in that regard reminds me a lot of when IBM acquired Red Hat. And Red Hat is, Linux started out as this free open source libraries. But for large corporations and government agencies, it was pretty scary to work with a raw open source libraries because you weren't really sure what you were going to get. Red Hat created conformance and safety and security.
Enterprise.
And then to have IBM take it on created a whole boom in Linux adoption by large enterprises. I think Watson X is going to be the same for artificial intelligence. And it's going to be very beneficial to the power industry and the automotive industry.
Excited about that. Thank you, David.
Thank you.